Caleb Turner had lived on his ranch for more than 20 years, and he knew every sound the land made. The wind moved through the tall grass in a certain way. The horses breathed and walked with a rhythm he recognized, and even the shifting of dry branches had a familiar pattern. That was why, on this particular late afternoon, he felt something unusual. It was not the sound of an animal or the movement of the wind. It felt like someone else was there, someone who didn't belong to the land the way he did. He walked across the open field with slow steps, trying not to startle anything or anyone. The sun was beginning to lower behind the hills, turning the sky soft orange. Caleb liked this time of day, the quiet before evening, but today that peaceful feeling didn't come. Something inside him whispered that he should be careful. As he reached the fence near the east side of his ranch, he noticed a small figure standing by one of the fence posts. At first, he thought it was one of the neighbor's kids, maybe wandering too far from home. But as he moved closer, he realized the figure wasn't a boy or a girl he knew. It was a young Apache girl, maybe 12 or 13 years old, dressed in simple clothes dusted with dirt from traveling. Her long, dark hair hung over her shoulders, and her face looked tired, as if she hadn't rested in a long time. Caleb stopped a few feet away so he wouldn't frighten her. She lifted her eyes toward him, and he noticed immediately that she was scared, not just nervous, but deeply worried about something. Her left hand was wrapped tightly with an old piece of cloth, and she held it close to her chest as if protecting it. He spoke softly, trying to sound as gentle as possible. "Hey there, are you all right? You look like you've been walking for a long time." The girl didn't answer right away. She looked around as if checking the field behind her. Then she nodded a little, though her expression didn't match the gesture. Caleb could see she wasn't fine at all. "My name is Caleb," he continued. "I live here. You're safe. I won't harm you. Do you need help?" Her eyes softened slightly. She took a careful step forward, but still held her wrapped hand close. "My name is Naya," she said in a quiet voice. I just needed somewhere to stop." Caleb could hear how tired she was, not only physically, but emotionally. He had seen this expression before in lost travelers, people who had walked too far, carrying too much fear or confusion. But there was something else about her that he couldn't quite understand yet, something in the way she kept glancing at her hand. "You can rest at my place," he offered. "It's not far. I can get you water, food, whatever you need." Naya hesitated. She seemed to think deeply, as if deciding whether she could trust him. Then she nodded again, more firmly this time. Caleb guided her slowly toward his house. The walk wasn't long, but Naya's steps were small and careful. Every once in a while, Caleb noticed she winced slightly, though he couldn't tell if it was pain from her hand or fear of something else. He didn't want to push her with questions, so he simply walked beside her, letting her take her time. When they reached the porch, he opened the door for her. Inside, the house smelled faintly of coffee and the wood he had cut earlier that morning. It wasn't a big house, but it was warm and welcoming. Naya entered quietly, her eyes scanning the room the way someone does when they're not sure if they're allowed to relax. Caleb filled a glass with water and handed it to her. She took it with her right hand, keeping her left one tucked close to her chest. Her fingers trembled slightly as she drank. She hadn't spoken much yet, but her face said enough. She had been through something. "Sit," Caleb said gently, motioning toward one of the chairs at the kitchen table. She sat slowly, her back stiff and alert. He leaned against the counter, giving her space. "Do you live nearby?" he asked softly. Naya nodded. "In the hills. With my family. We don't come this way often." Caleb knew there were small communities scattered through the mountains. They lived peacefully, keeping their traditions alive. He had respect for them and rarely saw them close to his ranch. "So what brought you all the way here?" he asked, keeping his voice calm. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she lowered her gaze and wrapped her right hand over the cloth around her left hand. Her breathing became unsteady for a moment. Caleb could see that whatever she carried inside wasn't something simple. He walked to the stove to warm some soup, giving her time. He didn't want her to feel pressured, but he also couldn't ignore that something was wrong. When he returned to the table with the bowl, he placed it gently in front of her. "You're safe here," he said kindly. "You can tell me anything. Or you can rest first, whatever you need." Naya looked at him with uncertain but grateful eyes. She picked up the spoon slowly, using her right hand, and began to eat. The warm food seemed to calm her a little. After a few moments, she finally spoke again. "I shouldn't have come here," she whispered. "But I didn't know where else to go." Caleb sat down across from her, listening carefully. "It's all right. I'm glad you came here instead of wandering alone." Naya looked up, and her eyes seemed to carry a quiet storm. "Something happened in the woods," she said softly. "Something I don't understand." Caleb leaned forward slightly but didn't interrupt. He wanted her to take her time. "I was walking near an old trail near the hills," she continued. "I wasn't supposed to go there. My elders say it's not a good place, but She paused. "I didn't think anything would happen." Her voice shook, and she placed her right hand over her wrapped hand again, almost protectively. "When I touched something there, something strange, I felt like I should run, and I did." Caleb's heart tightened a little. She wasn't telling everything yet, but she was slowly opening up. He could tell she was scared of whatever was under that cloth, not just the memory. "What happened to your hand?" he asked softly. At the question, Naya tensed immediately. Her shoulders stiffened and her eyes widened with worry. "Please don't ask about it," she said quickly. "Please." Caleb raised his hands gently, showing he meant no harm. "All right. I won't ask again, not until you're ready." She lowered her gaze again, her breath calming slowly. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The house was silent except for the soft sounds of the evening wind brushing against the windows. Caleb studied her carefully, not to judge, but to understand. She was frightened, tired, and alone. And whatever she carried under that cloth frightened her even more than the long journey. He wanted to help her, but he knew he needed to earn her trust first. As Naya finished the soup, she looked up at him again. Her eyes seemed softer now, but still full of something heavy she hadn't explained yet. "Thank you for helping me," she said quietly. Caleb nodded. "You're welcome. Rest for now. Tomorrow we'll figure things out together." But even as he said the words, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that the real story behind that wrapped hand was something far more complicated than either of them were ready for. Naya had finished her soup, but she still sat at the table with her shoulders stiff and her eyes lowered. Caleb could see she was trying to gather her thoughts, trying to decide how much she should share and how much she should keep hidden. He didn't want to rush her, so he let a few quiet minutes pass. The room felt calm, warmed by the soft glow of the evening light. After a while, Caleb stood up slowly and walked toward the shelf to make tea. He moved carefully, trying not to make quick or loud motions that could make her feel more nervous. When he brought the warm cup back to her, she accepted it with her right hand, still keeping her left hand pressed tightly against her side. "You don't have to say anything until you're comfortable," Caleb said gently. "You're safe here." Naya nodded, but didn't speak. She took a small sip of tea, letting the warmth settle inside her. Her eyes moved around the room again, as if she was checking each corner to make sure nothing unexpected was there. She looked like someone who had been looking over her shoulder for a long time and wasn't used to stopping. Caleb returned to his chair across from her. He didn't want to push, but he also felt that whatever she was carrying inside needed to be said. She looked too young to hold such a heavy worry alone. Finally, Naya took a slow breath and spoke. "You asked what happened to my hand," she said softly, almost in a whisper. "I can't explain it very well. I don't even understand it myself." Caleb kept his expression soft and encouraging. "It's all right. Just tell me whatever you can." She looked down at her wrapped hand, and her lips tightened slightly. "My elders warned us not to go near the old trail near the mountains. They always say it's a place we shouldn't enter. It's not because of animals or anything like that. They just say it is not meant to be disturbed." Caleb had heard stories like that before, old warnings passed down through generations. He didn't judge them. He knew people who lived close to nature often learned important things about the land that others missed. "I wasn't going to go there," she continued. "But yesterday I saw something strange. It looked like a small shine under the leaves. I thought maybe it was something harmless, a piece of metal or a little ornament lost by someone." She swallowed gently, remembering. "So I stepped off the path. Just for a moment. I only wanted to see what it was." Her voice grew smaller. "I shouldn't have." Caleb listened closely. She wasn't speaking dramatically, not exaggerating, not trying to impress. She was simply describing something that had frightened her deeply. "What did you see?" he asked softly. "It was something small," she replied. "I thought at first it was a carved object. It had a strange shape, smooth on one side and rough on the other. It didn't look like something natural." She paused, her fingers trembling as she touched the cloth around her hand. "I bent down and picked it up. The moment I did, I felt strange. It wasn't painful. It was more like a cold feeling traveling through my fingers." Caleb leaned forward slightly, but still kept his voice calm. "Did you drop it?" She shook her head slowly. "I tried, but when I opened my hand, it was still there, like it didn't want to leave." Caleb's eyebrows lowered with concern, but he didn't want to show too much surprise. He didn't know what exactly had happened, but he could see the genuine fear in her eyes. "I wrapped it quickly with a cloth," she said. "I thought maybe if I covered it, it would stop whatever was happening. I didn't want anyone in my family to be worried, so I ran. I didn't think about where, I just kept running." "That's when you found my fence," Caleb said quietly. Naya nodded. Caleb rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Maybe it's something that can be removed easily with the right tools. Maybe it's just stuck on the cloth, not your hand." The moment he said this, Naya's eyes widened with fear. She shook her head quickly. Please don't try to take it off." Her sudden reaction startled Caleb. Not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it came from somewhere deep inside her. She wasn't just afraid of the object. She was afraid of something she believed would happen if the cloth was removed. He lifted his hands gently. "All right. Okay. I won't touch it. I promise." Naya lowered her gaze, breathing deeply to calm herself. "I know it sounds strange," she whispered, "but when I tried to open the cloth earlier, I felt it move." Caleb's heart tightened slightly at her words, but he didn't let the emotion show on his face. He didn't want her to feel judged or dismissed. He knew that sometimes fear made people imagine things, but he also knew that dismissing her feelings would not help. "Do your parents know you're gone?" he asked carefully. "Yes," she said, "but they don't know what happened to my hand. They only know I ran before they could see. I was afraid they would try to unwrap it too." "What made you come to a ranch instead of going home?" Caleb asked gently. Naya hesitated. "I didn't want to scare them. I wanted to find someone who might understand things from outside the hills, someone who could help me without telling the whole community. I thought maybe someone living far from town but close to nature might know something." Caleb nodded thoughtfully. "And you found me?" "Yes," she said softly. I saw smoke from your chimney. I thought maybe it was a sign. Caleb felt a strange mix of responsibility and concern. He wanted to help her, but he also knew he needed to approach this carefully without jumping to conclusions or making her fear worse. He spoke gently. Naya, whatever happened, we'll figure it out together. But you need to rest first. You've been walking too long and you're tired. She nodded slightly, though she still held her wrapped hand tightly against her body. Caleb stood slowly. You can sleep in the spare room. It's warm, and you'll be safe there. Naya got up from the table, moving quietly toward the hallway. She walked carefully, as if she didn't want to disturb anything. Caleb watched her go, noticing once again how her left hand stayed wrapped against her chest the entire time. Before entering the room, she turned back to him. Her voice was soft, but serious. Please, don't try to remove it while I'm asleep. Caleb met her eyes and spoke with calm sincerity. I won't. You have my word. She nodded, stepped inside, and closed the door gently behind her. Caleb stood alone in the kitchen for a moment, letting everything settle in his mind. The warm evening light had faded, and the room felt strangely still. He didn't know what was wrapped under that cloth. He didn't know what she had touched in the woods. But one thing was clear. Whatever it was, it had frightened her enough to run miles away from home. And the way she had begged him, it wasn't simply fear of an injury. It was something deeper. Caleb took a slow breath and looked toward the closed door where Naya was resting. Tomorrow, he told himself, he would need to understand this better. But for now, he simply hoped she could sleep peacefully, because the weight she carried was clearly heavier than anything a child should bear alone. Caleb hardly slept that night, even though the house was quiet and the night outside was calm. His thoughts kept circling back to the small Apache girl resting in his spare room. Her worried eyes, her trembling hands, the way she begged him not to touch the cloth, it all stayed in his mind like a shadow he couldn't ignore. He walked to the window and looked out over the ranch. The moon hung low, casting a soft glow across the quiet fields. Usually, this view brought him peace, but tonight, a strange feeling settled in his chest. It wasn't fear exactly, but something close to uneasiness, something that told him the situation was bigger than he first realized. He tried to sleep again, but couldn't. Eventually, the sky began to brighten, and morning slowly washed over the land. Birds started chirping, wind brushed through the grass, and the ranch began to wake up. Still, Naya's wrapped hand stayed in his thoughts. When Caleb stepped into the kitchen, he heard soft footsteps behind him. He turned to see Naya standing in the hallway. She looked as if she hadn't slept much either. Her eyes held the same tired worry as the day before. Good morning, Caleb said gently. She nodded slightly. Good morning. He poured her a cup of warm milk and placed it on the table. She sat quietly, still holding her wrapped hand close to her chest. Caleb didn't mention it, not wanting to start the day with fear. But even without words, the cloth seemed almost like another presence in the room. After a few silent minutes, Caleb spoke softly. Did you sleep at all? A little, she whispered. I kept waking up. He nodded. It's all right. You're safe here. Naya looked down at her wrapped hand. I know, but I can still feel it. Caleb leaned back in his chair. Feel what? The thing I picked up, she said. Even when I'm not touching it, I can feel something, like it's still there. Caleb wanted to ask more, but he didn't want to scare her. Instead, he said, maybe it's just because you're thinking about it too much. When we get worried, our minds hold on to the feeling. Naya didn't argue, but she didn't look convinced either. A gentle silence filled the room until she finally spoke again. What are you going to do today? Caleb took a slow breath. We'll think about what's best to do. Maybe I can talk to your family. They might know more about the old trail. At this, Naya immediately shook her head. No, please don't take me home yet. Not like this. They will unwrap it. Her voice held deep fear, and Caleb could see this wasn't something she could easily face. All right, he said softly. Don't worry. I won't do anything without your permission. Her shoulders eased a little. Caleb knew she trusted him, but that trust had a fragile weight to it. He decided to change the subject. Let me take a look at your hand. Just look. I won't touch anything, I promise. Naya hesitated, but slowly she lifted her wrapped hand toward him. Caleb leaned closer but kept his hands away. The cloth was old, tied tightly, and slightly darkened from the dirt of her long walk. It didn't look like a medical wrap or anything cleanly done. It looked rushed, anxious, almost desperate. He didn't try to undo it. He simply observed. Does it hurt? He asked. No, she replied softly. Not pain. Just strange. Caleb nodded. Okay, I believe you. For a moment, their eyes met, and he could see the weight she was carrying. She wasn't lying. Her fear was real. He stood up and walked toward the window, thinking. A part of him wanted to ignore everything, to convince himself it was only a frightened child's imagination. But another part, a stronger part, told him he needed to know what was under that cloth. Not for curiosity, but for her safety. He turned back to her. Can I ask you something? She nodded hesitantly. When you wrapped it, did you actually see what it was doing? Or did you just feel scared? A small shiver ran down her shoulders. I saw it move, she said quietly. That's why I wrapped it so fast. I didn't want to see it again. Caleb felt a chill, but he didn't show it. He needed her to feel secure, not more afraid. He sat beside her. Naya, sometimes when we're frightened, our eyes can trick us. But I want to understand this fully. If there's something unusual, I need to see it. Not because I don't trust you, but because I want to protect you. Her breath quickened. She pulled her hand back slightly. Please, don't pull it. I won't, Caleb said firmly. I promise. I won't touch it, unless you say I can. She relaxed a little, but her fear was still clear. He stood and began preparing breakfast, trying to create a normal atmosphere. But no matter how much he tried, the feeling remained. An invisible tension between them and the secret hidden under the cloth. After breakfast, Caleb got to work outside on the ranch. He checked on the animals, repaired a fence, and tried to focus on his chores. But every now and then, his eyes drifted toward the house. He kept thinking about her hand, about her fear, about the object she found. By midday, he couldn't push the thoughts aside anymore. He wiped his hands, went inside, and found Naya sitting on the sofa, staring at her wrapped hand as if trying to listen to it. Naya, he said softly. She looked up. I think we should at least take a peek, he said gently. Not unwrap it fully, just loosen the cloth a little. That way I can see if it's something simple we can remove safely. Immediately, Naya's eyes filled with the same fear he saw yesterday. No, she whispered. Please don't. You don't understand. Caleb sat next to her. You're right. I don't understand. But how can I help you if I don't see what's wrong? She pulled her hand tighter against her chest. If you pull the cloth, something bad might happen. I don't know what, but I feel it. Her voice trembled. But not the way a child's would if they were simply scared of getting hurt. It was something deeper, like someone protecting others from something they didn't fully understand themselves. Caleb took a steady breath. Naya, you're brave. You came all this way alone. You trusted a stranger. That takes strength. He touched her shoulder gently, reassuringly. But I can't let you keep carrying something dangerous, even if it's only dangerous because of your fear. She looked torn, caught between trust and terror. Caleb knew she needed one final push, not force, not pressure, just calm reassurance. I will be as careful as possible, he said. I promise you nothing bad will happen. I'm not going to rip the cloth off. I'm only going to loosen it a little. If you tell me to stop, I'll stop. You control everything! She stared at him for a long moment. Her breathing grew uneven, and her fingers trembled around the cloth. Then finally she nodded slowly, though her eyes showed she was not ready. Okay, she whispered. Caleb nodded back. All right. Thank you for trusting me. I'll be careful. She placed her wrapped hand in his. Her hand felt cold, not from the weather, but from fear. Caleb's hands were warm from working outside, and he hoped that warmth might calm her. I'm only touching the cloth, he said softly. Not your hand. Not the object. Naya swallowed hard. Caleb slowly lifted one corner of the cloth. He barely moved it, just enough to see under it. Then, he froze. He didn't yank the cloth, he didn't shout, he didn't move suddenly. He simply stared. The breath caught in his throat. His blood ran cold. Whatever he saw, it wasn't what he expected. And suddenly he understood why Naya begged him not to touch it. For a long moment, Caleb didn't say a single word. He simply stared at Naya's hand, at the small space he had uncovered beneath the loose corner of the cloth. His body felt still, almost frozen, not because of danger, but because what he saw didn't make sense to him. It wasn't anything harmful. It didn't look dangerous, but it was certainly not something ordinary either. Naya watched him carefully, her eyes wide and full of worry. She studied his face as if she was searching for the truth he had found there. She didn't breathe until he finally sat back a little. What did you see? She whispered, afraid of his answer. Caleb took a slow breath, still trying to understand it himself. I don't know, he said honestly. But it's nothing like I expected. Naya pulled her hand back with soft urgency and tightened the cloth again, her fingers quick and shaky. She didn't unwrap it fully either. She just closed it enough to feel secure. Her voice was small. I told you it was strange. Yes, Caleb replied quietly. But it's not dangerous looking, just unusual. Naya didn't look relieved. She looked even more confused. That's what makes me scared, she said softly. I don't know what it is, or why it feels like it's not normal. Caleb nodded slowly. He placed his hands on his knees and thought carefully. He had lived around nature all his life. He had seen all kinds of things, odd stones, strange plants, unusual patterns in wood or metal, but this was different. The thing on her hand didn't look like part of her. But it didn't look like it was simply stuck either. It had a shape, a smooth surface, and something about it almost felt alive, though not in any frightening way. More like it responded to touch or warmth. But he didn't want to scare her further. He kept his explanation simple. It looks like something old, he said. Maybe something your community knows about. Something with history. Naya shook her head quickly. If they knew about it, they would never let us near that trail. They always say the land remembers things we shouldn't disturb. Caleb leaned back, thinking again. Maybe it's connected to your elders' stories. Maybe the object is something from long ago. Naya lowered her eyes. I wish I never picked it up. Caleb felt her regret deeply. She was only a child, trying to understand something far beyond her experience. He wanted to help her, but he also wanted to respect her feelings. Listen, he said softly. I didn't pull the cloth all the way. I didn't touch it. I only saw a little. And from what I saw, it didn't look harmful. It looked like something we need to understand, not fear. She hesitated. But how do we understand it? Caleb thought about the question. He could go to town and ask someone, but he didn't want strangers to see her fear or take advantage of her uncertainty. He needed someone who respected nature and old stories, someone who wouldn't jump to wrong ideas. "There's someone we can visit," he said. "A woman who lives a few miles away. Her name is Laura. She knows about old things, old stories, old objects. She respects your people's traditions." Naya listened quietly, her eyes thoughtful. "But only if you want to," Caleb added gently. "No one will force you." Naya looked down at her wrapped hand. She seemed to be fighting a silent battle inside, fear on one side, curiosity on the other. After a long moment, she nodded slowly. "Maybe she can help," she said in a whisper. Caleb smiled softly. "Good. We'll go after the sun gets a little higher. It's still early." For the rest of the morning, Caleb let Naya rest while he prepared his horse and checked his supplies. He made sure to pack water, some food, and an extra warm blanket just in case Naya needed it. He wanted the trip to feel safe for her. Naya watched him from the porch, her eyes following his movements. She looked calmer now, though still uncertain, but the decision to seek help had given her a small sense of purpose. When everything was ready, Caleb helped her climb gently onto the horse. She held the saddle with her right hand, keeping her wrapped hand close to her chest. Caleb climbed up behind her and made sure she was steady. "Are you comfortable?" he asked. "Yes," she said softly. "Thank you." The horse moved slowly at first, then more steadily as they left the ranch behind. The air was cool and filled with the scent of wild plants. Birds flew overhead, and the open fields stretched out before them. For a while, Naya stayed quiet, just watching the scenery. Then, after a long silence, she said, "When you looked under the cloth, you didn't look scared. You looked surprised." Caleb nodded. "Because I didn't expect it to look like that." "What did it look like to you?" she asked carefully. He chose his words with thought. "It looked like something that wasn't placed there by force. It looked like something that attached itself, calmly, not to hurt you." Naya lowered her gaze. "I feel like it's watching me," she whispered. Caleb didn't dismiss her feeling. Sometimes when we don't understand something, our minds give it human qualities. That doesn't mean it's doing anything. It only means you're aware of it because it's new. Naya thought about this quietly. They rode for nearly an hour until they reached a small wooden house near the edge of a forest. Smoke rose from the chimney, and a small garden grew beside the porch. Caleb knew this place well. Laura lived simply, close to nature, and respected every culture that lived near the land. When they arrived, Laura stepped out of her house, brushing dust from her hands. She was a tall woman with calm eyes that always seemed to understand things without being told. "Caleb Turner," she said with a slow smile. "This is a surprise." Caleb nodded politely. "Laura, we need your help. This is Naya." Naya gave a small nod, holding her wrapped hand close. Laura's eyes softened. "Welcome, child. Come inside." They entered the warm little home. It smelled of herbs and clean wood. Naya looked around carefully, but she seemed more comfortable than before. Laura gestured for her to sit. "Tell me what troubles you." Naya glanced at Caleb. He nodded gently, giving her silent support. Slowly, she began to speak. She told Laura about the old trail, the shiny object, the strange cold feeling, and how it stayed on her hand. Laura listened without interrupting, her expression calm but thoughtful. When Naya finished, Laura looked at Caleb. "May I see?" she asked gently. Naya hesitated, then gave a small nod. Very slowly, as slow as morning light spreading over the land, Naya lifted her wrapped hand forward. Laura didn't touch it. She only looked. She leaned closer and studied the cloth carefully. "Child," she said softly, "did you cover it because it frightened you? Or because it changed?" Naya swallowed. "Both." Laura nodded, as though this confirmed something she already suspected. "Would you allow me to loosen the cloth?" "Only a little. Only enough to see." Naya's fingers tightened nervously. Caleb placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to," he reminded her gently. "But she may understand more than we do." Naya closed her eyes for a moment, took a shaky breath, and whispered, "Okay." Laura lifted one corner of the cloth. Her face remained calm, but her expression changed slightly, just enough for Caleb to notice. She didn't look frightened. She looked amazed. She covered it again gently and sat back. "This," Laura said softly, "is something I have only heard about in stories. Something old, something that chooses who may see it." Naya looked up quickly. "What is it?" Laura smiled kindly. "It is not something meant to harm you. It is something the land kept hidden until it trusted you." Caleb and Naya exchanged a confused glance. "What does that mean?" Caleb asked. Laura folded her hands in her lap. "It means she did not find it by accident," she said quietly. "It found her." Naya's breath trembled. "But why?" Laura's eyes softened. "That," she said, "is what we must discover next." Caleb stood frozen for a moment, staring at the strange thing that had clung to Naya's palm. His heartbeat was loud in his ears, and for several seconds he could not even speak. The object was small, light in color, and shaped in a way he had never seen before. It looked almost like a dried plant root at first, but the longer he looked, the more he noticed tiny movements, slow, weak, but real enough to make his skin crawl. Naya sat quietly beside him, watching him with worried eyes. She did not move, did not raise her voice, and did not say anything right away. She simply waited for him to understand the truth. When Caleb finally found his voice, it came out softer than he expected. He asked her how long she had been carrying it. She took a slow breath and told him that she first noticed it earlier that morning. She did not know what it was or where it came from. She only remembered walking past an old dried stream near the mountain trail. She heard a soft sound behind her, turned around, and saw something strange on the ground. When she leaned closer, something snapped upward and brushed her hand. She felt only a light touch at first, but then something tightened against her palm. The next moment, she realized it was stuck to her. No matter how hard she tried, she could not pull it off. That was when she ran. Caleb listened carefully, trying to stay calm. His mind kept racing, but he knew he needed to stay steady for the girl sitting in front of him. She had gone through enough fear already. He looked at the object again, studying it closely. It did not look dangerous now, only fragile and tired. He wondered if it was some strange plant root or a small insect he had never seen before. Living on the ranch had taught him many things about nature, but this was new even for him. Naya told him that when she reached the ranch, she felt safe for the first time since morning, but she also felt responsible. She believed the object was connected to something that should not have been disturbed. Her elders had always told her and the other children to avoid the old trail near the mountain. They said it was a place where certain plants and old growth were left untouched. She had not taken their warnings seriously because she never understood the reason behind them. But now she did. And that was why she begged Caleb not to pull the cloth. She was afraid something worse would happen if it was removed without care. Caleb gently asked if the object caused her pain. She shook her head. It did not hurt her, but she could feel it holding onto her hand. It was not heavy or painful. It simply would not let go. Caleb knew they could not leave it like that. They needed to remove it safely, and they needed to do it soon. He also knew they could not do it alone. He took a deep breath, stood up, and walked toward the kitchen drawer, where he kept his small first aid kit. Naya watched him closely, trusting him but still nervous. When he returned, he sat beside her again and explained what they were going to do. He told her they would not pull it suddenly. They would work slowly, carefully, and gently until it could be separated from her skin without hurting her. She nodded, her eyes calm now. Caleb was surprised by how brave she was. Most children would have cried or panicked long ago, but she had stayed strong. Using a small wooden stick and a soft cloth, Caleb began lifting the edges of the object. Every time he moved a little piece, Naya breathed in deeply, but she did not pull away. The object reacted slightly, like a leaf rustling in a soft breeze, but it did not grip tighter. After several minutes of slow work, Caleb finally managed to separate one small part of it from her skin, then another, and another. After what felt like a long time, the object finally released completely. Caleb placed it gently inside a glass jar he had prepared earlier. Naya sighed with relief and slowly stretched her fingers. There was a small mark on her palm, but nothing serious. Caleb cleaned the area carefully and wrapped it with a clean cloth. She thanked him softly. He smiled, though he was still shocked by what he had seen. Now that the object was off her hand, he could study it without fear of harming her. It looked even stranger inside the jar. It lay still now, no longer moving. Caleb wondered if it had lost its strength, or if it simply reacted differently when not attached to skin. After giving Naya a little more food and water, Caleb told her they needed to take her home before night. She agreed, relieved that the difficult part was over. She said her family would understand the object better than she did. They knew the history of the land and the mountain trails. Caleb nodded, realizing that was true. Some knowledge lived only in families and communities that had been tied to the land for generations. He placed the jar inside a small wooden box, and together they walked to his truck. The sun was beginning to lower, casting long shadows across the dry land. As Caleb drove toward the mountains, Naya looked out the window, her mind finally free from fear. She talked more now, about her family, her community, and the stories her elders would share during gatherings. Caleb listened with respect, realizing how much he did not know about the land he lived on. When they reached the edge of Naya's settlement, a few adults came outside as soon as they saw her. Their faces showed surprise and worry. Naya ran to them, explaining everything in her soft voice. The adults listened carefully, their expressions changing from concern to relief. They thanked Caleb many times for helping her. One of the elders asked to see the object, so Caleb brought the wooden box to him. The elder opened the box slowly and examined the jar closely. He nodded with understanding, as though he recognized the strange object. He explained that the old trail near the mountain was home to rare plants and small life forms that grew only in untouched land. They were not dangerous, but they were sensitive. Some could attach themselves to skin when disturbed. They were not meant to cause harm, but they reacted naturally to sudden movement or heat. The elders had always warned the children not to walk near the trail to avoid such situations. Caleb felt a mix of relief and curiosity. The elder thanked him again for removing it carefully. He said that sudden force could have damaged the object or hurt Naya's hand. Caleb was grateful he had acted slowly and gently. After everything was settled, Naya approached Caleb one last time. She smiled, an honest, grateful smile that made Caleb's worries fade. She thanked him again, this time with a calm voice. Caleb told her she was very brave, and she deserved to go home and rest. She nodded happily. As Caleb drove back toward his ranch, the evening sky turned a deep golden color. The land around him looked peaceful again. He felt lighter, as if a great tension had lifted. He thought about everything that had happened, the fear, the discovery, the careful removal, and the lessons he had learned. He now understood something he had not realized before. The land held secrets, and those who lived on it for generations understood those secrets better than anyone else. When he reached home, he sat on his porch, watching the quiet horizon. He felt grateful that the day had ended safely. He also felt a deep respect for the Apache community and their knowledge of the land. He promised himself he would never ignore their warnings again. Some warnings came from years of understanding, and they deserved to be respected. That night, he slept peacefully knowing he had helped someone in need and had learned something important. And from that day forward, whenever he passed near the mountain trail, he remembered the girl who came to his ranch with fear in her eyes and a strange object on her hand. He remembered her courage, her trust, and her soft voice saying, "Please, don't pull it." And he smiled, knowing he had done the right thing in the end.